Hi, my name is Karen, and I'm an American lay student of Ajahn Suchart, or Ajahn Suchart Abhijato, who's given me his permission to read his books to you for free. Ajahn Suchart's books and talks are always free. Any ads you may see or hear in this recording have been put there by the platform you are using to listen or view with for its own revenue, in exchange for letting us use their platform for free. Please forgive me for any mispronunciations of names, places, or words, and for any background noises, as I'm just making these recordings in my apartment with an unruly dog and in the middle of a city. We are reading Beyond Birth, Ajahn Suchart Abhijato, an autobiography, and it was released December 2021. We're still in chapter 4, and we are starting on page 174, and the subtitle of this section is called Never Used a Towel. Ever since I have been ordained, I have not used a towel after bathing. I usually put the robe right on, and it dries the body, and then the robe would dry as well. We often waste our time with useless practices, so I tried to reduce them methodically by asking the question whether those things were necessary. I tried to find the reasons why we use a towel. When after a bath, we get wet. But if we brush our hands lightly over the wetness and put on the robe, we can be dry without using a towel. Using a towel meant that we would have to acquire one and waste our time washing it. But a monk can put on the shoulder robe that can accomplish the same end. When I study the monk's way of life, I find that it's compatible with my own demeanor. The next section begins on page 175 and is titled Monastic Routines at Wat Yannasangwararam. The monk's routines began in the morning, going down to the sala to prepare the seats for the meals, and polishing its floor with coconut shells. The sala floor was covered with wax that had been heated up with kerosene, so when it was walked on, the footprints that were left on it had to be polished with coconut shells every morning and evening. Everybody had to participate, so we had to get there on time. Otherwise, it would look like we were taking advantage of others if we arrived late. We began to polish all together and then swept the floor. When this chore was finished, we would put on the robes to go for the morning alms. After the alms and the meal were finished, we washed the bowls, helped clean the sala, and then returned to our kuti to meditate until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when we had coffee, tea, or fruit juices if we wanted. We cleaned the sala again, drew water from the well into buckets in a wagon, and went around the monastery to fill the jars in the restrooms, kutis, and all other locations. We would return to our kutis to take a bath and continue to practice walking and sitting meditation until it was time to go to sleep. No more than 4 hours, because that was all we needed. Then we would get up and begin the morning routines all over again until it was time for the morning alms. Next, there's a quote on page 176. In the monastery, where monks were seriously practicing meditation, we didn't see each other much at all. We only came out for common activities, such as morning alms, eating, sweeping, and cleaning. When we did that, it wasn't really a group activity because each did our own part without talking to each other. Those who had sweeping duty just swept. Those who needed to polish the floor, polished. And those who had to dust, dusted. After we finished, we would go back to our own duty of walking and sitting meditation or reading Dhamma books. Next, there is another quote on page 177. At Luangta's monastery in the early days, there was no construction or anything. The monks were expected to just meditate. Except after the rains retreat, monks might be repairing the kutis or building a couple of new ones. Luangta didn't want us to do too much, only what was necessary. We had to adhere to a specific schedule, keeping the job moving along to finish as soon as possible. We would stop in the evening to go back to meditation. These other tasks were just secondary. The main job was to practice meditation. The next section begins on page 178 and is titled Monastic Routines as a Means to Help Build Mindfulness. Routines for monks were used as a means to help us develop mindfulness, because staying idle would make the mind be too distracted, to chit-chat, to find something to eat or drink, etc. This forest monastery was strict about routines, to develop diligence, as well as to prevent us from thinking the wrong thoughts. These could still pose problems, even for those who could meditate. When I was at Bantad, I was not that interested in making brooms, toothpicks, or the like. I didn't quite possess the dexterity required. What I could do was bind the brooms, as long as they were usable. This was because I was only interested in developing my meditation. Even though he never said anything, Luangta apparently was aware of this. For example, he would chase me away when I was sometimes helping to build kutis or a sala. If a person's mind has come inside, Luangta would not make the person do work. But for people whose minds like to go out, Luangta would find lots of work for them, so that their minds would not be distracted. Usually, when they were ordained, monks really didn't know how to meditate, so they had to participate in the duties in various work projects in the monastery. But Luangta's monks, having practiced, would prefer to be in solitude instead. This was because the mind that has come inside sees the value of the calmness of the mind. External work is therefore seen as a coarse activity, which would not lead to peace of mind, but would instead destroy it. The next section begins on page 179 and is titled, No Electricity at the Wat. In those days, there was no electricity at Wat Bantad. However, later, when there were more activities that involved lay people who came to make merit, electricity was installed in the common areas, such as the kitchen and the sala. Electricity, which was looked at as a tool of the kilesas, was not available in the kutis, because it would bring in craving for the senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch through the use of refrigerators, TVs, radios, and other things. If they were let in, it would be as if we lit a fire to burn our kuti, burning the mind with lust, passion, greed, anger, and delusion. Therefore, Luangta was adamant about not allowing electricity. He used the name Devadatta for television, because Devadatta was the one who tried to destroy Buddhism. So during the time that I was at Bantad, we had no electricity, no newspapers, no radio, nothing of that type. We only had walking meditation, sitting meditation, and other activities pertaining to monkhood, such as morning alms, sweeping, and cleaning the courtyard and the sala. These were the only activities for the monks at Bantad, because they could enable us to reach the path to Nibbana. To involve ourselves with the world through the senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch would be like leaving the monkhood to immerse ourselves back into those sensual pleasures again. Our teacher was very protective about keeping out all links that would destroy the peace and sever the concentration of the meditators. Thus, by cutting out electricity, these distractions would have a harder time becoming part of our lives. It is imperative that those who ordain adjust to their current environment. To avoid suffering, we have to accept the lowest and worst quality of life possible. Once we can do that, then we're able to adjust to any condition, no matter how bad it might be. The reason that Wat Bantad did not have electricity or piped-in water was to train us to adjust our body and mind to the reality of life. There is a quote next on page 180. A real monk has to reside in the forest exercising restraint over the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. Monks in yellow robes shouldn't just roam about and do whatever the lay people do, the way we see nowadays in the newspapers where photos are posted of monks at inappropriate places and criticized. While it has become more common and those monks do not seem to be bothered by it, in the old days these occurrences would have been scandalous. The reason that Luangta did not permit us to accept invitations was to protect us from being exposed to the lure of sensuality. The next section begins on page 181 and is titled, Losses Outweigh Gains. Monks who are strict and intense in their practices would not accept invitation for activities outside the monastery. During my time at Bantad, Luangta did not permit monks to accept outside invitations because he did not want them to go out and be taken in by temptations. When monks go outside of the monastery, they see, hear, and smell the surrounding secular world, which could invoke desires that might take days to get under control after coming back to the monastery, because those worldly images remain in the mind for a long time. Luangta, therefore, forbade the monks from accepting outside invitations because the losses outweighed the gains. The monk might bless his family and friends for just a little bit, then he himself would have to deal with the temptations and the disturbances that might lead to the thought of leaving the monkhood long after. It was not worth it. Monks and novices who had yet to grasp the principles of being ordained and went outside the monastery would either leave the monkhood or remain in ordination, but not as real monks, because the temptation through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body would not be under control. Without control of these temptations, the mind would be filled with sensual and greedy desires instead of mental peace. The next section begins on page 182 and is titled, How Dhamma Book for Self-Preparation and Where is the Religion Came to Be. The first year that I stayed at Bantad, a layperson who was in the final stage of cancer and had only 6 months to live, asked Luangta for permission to stay at Bantad so that she could prepare to die. Luangta said that if she intended to practice meditation, she could come and stay. However, if she wanted to bring a doctor and medicines to continue treatment, she'd better not. The woman was brave enough to come and stay alone without further treatment, so that she could just concentrate on meditation. Luangta was very kind to her and spent almost every night teaching her for 90 days. He only skipped those lessons when he had to give Dhamma talks at the sala or had obligations outside the monastery. This was unprecedented ever since the monastery was established. It was the first and only time that Luangta had ever spent time in the kitchen area to teach a layperson at this personal level. He taught this layperson to separate the body from the mind and how to deal with suffering. When pain arises, control the mind to make it calm, or use wisdom to separate the one in pain and the one knowing the pain. The one in pain is the body, and it is not bothered by the pain. Instead, the one knowing the pain is bothered, because it wants the pain to stop. But the pain will still be there, whether we want it or not. When there is desire, there will be suffering. If there was no desire, there would be no suffering. There would be equanimity, and we could stay with the pain without any desire for it to go away. If it goes, it goes. If it doesn't go, then stay with it. This layperson was able to practice until her mind had the strength and tranquility to accept pain and death. Later on, some lay people asked Luangta to publish the teachings. After being asked several times, he finally gave the permission, and that is where the materials for the 2 books, Dhamma Book for Self-Preparation and where is the religion came from. At first, Luangta did not give his permission. He said that these Dhamma talks were too strong, because they were about preparing oneself to fight pain at the time of dying. Luangta didn't want to disseminate these teachings to the general public who hadn't practiced, because they wouldn't be able to benefit from them. It would be like giving spicy curry to a child who would shake his head after one bite and not want any more. However, if the curry were given to an adult who likes spicy food, he'd be hooked after taking the first bite, and then would receive its benefits. This was because Luangta emphasized the pain of the body. He emphasized meditation to fight the pain. He taught how the pain would be and how to find a way to fight it. The next section begins on page 184 and is titled, The Heart of Luangta's Teachings. Wisdom Develops Samadhi, a book that completely encompasses Luangta's teachings, has been translated into English so foreigners can understand and appreciate it, and is now available internationally. It is considered the heart of meditation practice that covers in great detail sila, morality, samadhi, concentration, and panya, wisdom. He also explains how wisdom develops samadhi, because most people think that they can use the mantra Buddha alone to calm the mind. However, when Buddha cannot conquer it, wisdom also needs to be used. This was why he called the method Wisdom Develops Samadhi. If you want the heart of Luangta's teachings, then read Wisdom Develops Samadhi, because it contains the heart of what he was teaching. In it, he explains in full the complete details of sila, morality, samadhi, concentration, upachara samadhi, access concentration, apana samadhi, full concentration, and panya, wisdom. There is a quote on page 186. It is a blessing to have a good teacher, because we can depend on him for encouragement and guidance in our meditation practice. The next section begins on page 187 and is titled, Encouragement from Dhamma Talks. While I was at Bantad, Luangta trained the monks when his schedule permitted, usually once every 4 or 5 days. In the evening, just before it was dark, he would ask the monks on duty at the sala to call all the monks for a meeting. There was no drum or bell or any other signal, only word of mouth. When the word about Luangta calling for a meeting came, everyone would drop what he was doing, grab his sitting cloth, flashlight, and outer robe, then rush to the sala, because Luangta would be waiting there already. It would not be proper to let the teacher wait for us. The ones arriving first would arrange the seats and light the incense and candles. We had no electricity, so there was no microphone. During the Dhamma talk, there would only be 2 lit candles. There were more than 10 monks and novices, and we would all sit in front of Luangta, who would talk just loudly enough for us all to hear. Normally, he would give 2 rounds of Dhamma talks. The first one would have to do with the normal practicing Dhamma, after which he would say, "All right, Tanpanya, explain to all your friends." At that time, there were 5 or 6 foreign monks, so Venerable Ajahn Panya would spend about 10 minutes going over Luangta's Dhamma talk. While waiting, Luangta would be drinking water and chewing betel nut, and the other monks would be meditating until Venerable Ajahn Panya finished translating. Once the first round had finished, the second round would be more conversational, talking about his meditation experiences, such as how he could meditate through the night, how and what he did to fight fear, about his stay with Venerable Ajahn Mun, and other miscellaneous knowledge which lasted about another 45 minutes. We usually spent an hour and a half to 2 hours each time, after which we would return to our own kutis to continue walking and sitting meditation. During the Dhamma talks, we could not move until they were over and had to deal with the pain. If we concentrated on the Dhamma talks, the pain would not be as acute. If we had no concentration while listening and paid attention to the pain, it would escalate because the mind kept building it up. When Luangta gave a Dhamma talk, it was as if he was giving concentrated tutoring, because he would cover everything completely, from sila, samadhi, and panya, up to liberation, vimutti, and the development of these. His teachings were so clear that I greatly benefited from them, because I did not have to feel my way around by myself. Learning by reading books, one still had to find one's way around, but it was still better than having no books at all. It would be easy to get lost through misunderstanding, just like a person who did not know how to read a map, reading it upside down, placing the north where the south should be. Similarly, having a good teacher could alert us when we went down the wrong path. If we got stuck somewhere, he would tell us what it was like to be stuck here, and what it was like to be stuck there. Hearing Luangta's Dhamma talks continuously was a good reminder for us to see which direction to take. The minds of practitioners often fell into traps throughout the practice. Once being able to attain samadhi, they tended to become addicted to peace and tranquility and got stuck at this state. After withdrawal from samadhi, they didn't carry on their investigation and contemplation of Dhamma. Instead, they resumed their worldly activities, and their mind ended up becoming restless. They would then re-enter samadhi, yet they failed to develop panya, or wisdom. Luangta always reminded us that after withdrawing from samadhi, we should proceed on the wisdom path by contemplating asuppa, to quell our sensual desires, by investigating the body, to see that it is unattractive and just garbage. Apart from the 5 external parts of the body, including head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, and skin, there were also internal constituents hidden under the skin, such as flesh, tendons, ligaments, bones, and organs. We have to see all these with wisdom, because the naked eye cannot see through skin. But wisdom can penetrate through when we have the ability to set up the images of the organs in our mind. Whenever I heard the Dhamma talks, I was very encouraged by them and would go back to do many hours of walking meditation. On days without the Dhamma talk, an hour of walking meditation would wear me out. I would get tired and had no desire to keep on walking. The encouragement from Dhamma talks made such a difference, but would wane after a few days, and that was why Luangta called for a teaching session often. And we're going to end there today on page 189, resuming in the next recording on page 190 with a new section entitled Being Strict. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time with Metta. Bye-bye.